Hi, so I've been promising for a while that I was going to talk about this girl, and she's my first Middie Blythe, Dainty Meadow. Um, this has been a really interesting addition to my collection because by the time I started collecting, there were so many people customizing pull-ups and Blythes that my preference went immediately to all of the artist creations, and I sort of dismissed the original releases. And especially with the with the Blythes, I have had a really hard time with the shiny face and the downcast gaze, and people are always complaining about having to wash their hair and having to give them hair spa. Frankly, I still think is a problem. I think the companies that are producing these dolls and selling them for $150 and above should really be putting a little bit more quality into the hair. I had to change my light for a little bit because it was really blinding me. But, you know, for me, if I look at an image over and over again and it catches my eye a little bit and then it maybe draws my interest again and again and again, and that interest grows, then I find myself thinking about and wanting a doll in particular. So let's talk about dolls. And so that's how this little girl came to be. I still haven't been able to bring myself to buy a stock Blythe because I am so in love with the Blythe customs, and they are very expensive. So if I'm going to be putting together a budget or saving up money to buy a Blythe, then it's usually going to go to, or when I can, it's going to go to one of the artists making beautiful customizations. They're just so realistic. They look so alive, and there's so much of the artist's hand and personality inside of their creation. So that I really value. But sure enough, in the past several years that I've been collecting, having seen so many stock Blythes, I started to have a craving for one. And what I came towards were the Middies, because it's hard for me to put language to it, but it's like a Blythe, except it's a maybe smaller commitment, literally by physical size. So let's look at this little one. First, she's one of the only dolls that I have that I like putting back in the box and even displaying her in the box. So I think that has something to say for my relationship to her. She's sort of like an image of something, a representation of something. And if you're like me, there's so much joy to opening a box, to receiving a box for the first time and getting the look of that original display. Of course, I think this is even a little bit better because she doesn't have like a big plastic strip across her forehead, for one. And I've put on a couple more details of her stock. She's actually standing inside of her box, inside of her stand, or on her stand, which I'll show you in just a moment. So let's take a moment to look at the box. The Blythe logo is so classic. It's so 1970s, and it just speaks to my heart. Her title, Dainty Meadow, and then the Japanese kanji below, which I assume says Dainty Meadow. Woo, look at all those reflections. And there she is, looking sideways. Her box is kind of a pink tan color. It has these various bows with a flower design that's already telling you that this character is from a Russian cultural aesthetic. A whole lot more Japanese. I wish I could read it. Some silly explanations on how to use the stands, which I don't think anybody really needs that explanation. And again, just the decorations along all the sides constantly brings to mind Disneyland for me. Let's take her out of the box. I have been opening and closing this box quite a bit, so it's pretty loose at this point. Here on one of the lapels of the box closing, you can see this little hollowed out version of this clover, and I think that comes with maybe all, but at least some of the stock Blythes. It's a decoration within the theme that you can use to give color and give a little bit of personalization to the stand that comes with the Blythes. So if you are familiar with Blythe stands, they're always in this clover leaf pattern. And taking out the box. Of course, this is so much more simplified than when she arrives brand new, because as you can see by all of the scars on the back of this box, there was a lot of tape and ties, and for Blythe collectors, doll collectors, etc., that's not new. These are very securely fastened onto their boxes, particularly for the collectors that like to keep them in the box and never open them, and I can't imagine that kind of, I am not that kind of a collector. Oh, so here she is, and I'll take her out stand and all. First you can see the backing of her box. It's a lovely pink color. There are X's and flowers, so it sort of looks like XOX, so hugs and kisses, and pink. I love pink. She has this hair bandana, ties around her neck, has long strands that feel like leather or suede, and at the very end, a little white poofy pom-pom. She has this sweet little vest that I think must be a traditional vest of Russian country folk costume. It has Velcro in the back. We'll be taking it off in just a little bit. And then this underdress that echoes the design on her box, or I suppose her box design echoes her dress. And then finally the stand itself, so let's take her off of it for a minute. Oh, she comes with little yellow socks and little black Mary Janes that have a little gold dot on the sides. I'm going to put her down for just a moment. And her stand. Here is the clover leaf cutout that I punched out to decorate her stand, and then her stand as it is. And by the way, Blythes come with a head tilt. Why don't they all come with a head tilt? It seems like a fairly simple design that could have been upgraded at least into the regular Neo Blythes, and definitely the pull-ups and dolls. The only dolls that I've had that come with a head tilt are the teeny tiny miniature, what are they called? I guess they're called mini pull-ups. So taking off her headscarf, this is where the charm really begins for me. So, if you know the history of Blythes, you know that they appeared in the 1970s originally, released by Kenner. And those original Blythes, if you've seen their images, are 1970s through and through. And so when I started to finally appreciate the stock Blythes a little bit more, I found myself especially drawn to those that had the appearance of a 1970s era hairstyle and makeup. And I would say that that's the case for Dainty Meadow. I've named her Daisy, and I spell it Daezie. But anyway, I think she looks very much like a little bohemian hippie. I can imagine her hanging out at Central Park in New York City, particularly when we take off this Russian vest. And this vest, by the way, is so well made. So the blue is a felt-like material. The white trim is a synthetic trim. And the little flower pattern is just very true to traditional Russian folk costuming. That's a Velcro closure, and of course it is impeccably made. Really nice quality. So she has little buttons, a little ribbon on the side. Let me see if I can get a little bit more light on her. So you can kind of see the striped material of the top of her dress, a little bit more detail of the skirt of her dress, and then again her little socks and shoes. Now she has the tiniest feet of any of the dolls that I have, so I've had a really hard time giving her a variety of outfits with a variety of shoes. And so I spent a little bit of time on Etsy looking at tutorials on how to make shoes for your doll. And I crafted out these somewhat rough but pretty cute shoes. So I made a pair of boots, and I used yarn for the lining, and then I made, this is actually separate, like a little leg warmer type cuff out of the same yarn with you know, just your basic first 2 rows of crochet. Anyway, just to give the boot a decoration, I made a little pair of burgundy Mary Janes. So they're really cute. They have a cardboard base and then foam sole. And I made the top out of felt. They look pretty cute. They're decent. They're fluffier than I would hope. They're definitely bigger than her stock shoes, but they are as small as my fingers can handle. And these were actually a bit of a fail. I think they'll do well as moccasins, as slip-ons, but in fact, I kind of hate that kind of shoe on humans, so I'm not sure how interested I will be to use it on my doll, unless maybe she's wearing pants and you can't see the rest of the shoe, so you can just see the tips. But, I mean, this whole project cost me just a handful of dollars. Just buying felt and foam and glue, and I got a ton of that nasty Gorilla Glue on the tips of my fingers. That was no fun. So you need to be patient. You need to use toothpicks and use your fingertips minimally. Would you like to see how a Middie's eyes rotate? So they don't have the blink option the Blythes do to change their eyes. They also don't have multiple eye chips, but instead there is this little wheel, and you just rotate that wheel from side to side. The effect is that the Middie then looks side to side, which actually gives them a lot of options when the head tilt is involved. The truth is that between her shiny face and her downcast look, so that I can't ever really feel like I'm making eye contact with her, she in many ways has less personality than a lot of my other characters. And at the same time, I feel myself really drawn to spending time with her and to photographing her because, again, she's more like a representation of an image. She just absolutely satisfies for me the need for that classic, authentic Blythe. I think if Takara in the years and months to come releases a Blythe that really calls to me, that I might now be more open to buying that Blythe and keeping her as she is. So I suppose you could call this Middie Blythe my gateway Blythe. I know that I love Blythes. I know that I prefer them over almost any other kind of doll, and yet I haven't been willing to have a classic Blythe.